From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Howdy ho.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a true crime mystery, a cold case you think that could be solved, a copy of the treasure map leading to the land of missing socks, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tip-Ster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. Her work won't be done until every murder is solved and every citizen can tie a cherry stem into a bow with their tongue. Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Oh, producer Mark, did you see me doing that last night with the cherry stem? Is that what?
No, but I knew you had a maraschino cherry,
Yeah.
and I knew you were going to do it because you do it automatically, and I
Yeah.
still don't know how you do it.
It's I thought that was the reason you asked me to marry you.
Well, it was, but I still
Okay.
don't know how you do it.
I don't. I feel like it's, every relationship needs some mystery,
Okay.
and I don't feel like I should give like a workshop on it because I don't want to give my secrets away.
Well, it's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you.
Goes into the mouth, mouth closes, mouth reopens moments later with the cherry stem tied into a perfect little bow.
Yeah,
How?
some people are great singers, some people are great writers, some people tie cherry stems into a knot with their tongue. That's all
Okay.
I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true.
God put us here all with our own individual gifts.
That's true. It's quite a gift.
Gift with a T, not GIF, GIF, or GIF. That is the stupid movable meme video things that are really popular with the
kinda
kids.
think they're funny.
I hate GIFs with all my heart. Hate them. Really.
I think they're very useful in conveying
I do not.
sarcasm.
I do not. If I see one more picture of Michael Jackson eating popcorn in a movie theater, I will impale my own eyeballs.
Oh, yeah, that one is annoying.
That's annoying. Yeah. So, yeah, we all have our own gifts, and I just happen to be, good at tying a cherry stem in a knot with my tongue. It's really no big deal. It's not, I'm not a neurosurgeon. I'm just a, simple woman with a gift.
And what a gift it is.
And what a gift it is. Yeah. Thank you. No one, I'm sure, benefits more than you. So this week's case is kind of amazing. I'm always very delighted when my two worlds collide, my world of yoga and my world of love of true crime. So one of my yogis sent me a wonderful article and said, I am friends with the writer, and we were both friends with the missing girl. And I was like, what? And it's a really fascinating case. I feel like Bill Hader should be here dressed as Stefan and say, New York's hottest nightclub has everything. It's got an Israeli commando and Leslie Abramson and a murderer from London and a burgundy Rolls Royce. It's
Wow.
got everything and nothing all at once. This family from the San Fernando Valley has been missing since 1982, October of 1982, and it is a really layered, like baklava kind of a thingy here. It's amazing. Family from Northridge, which is where one of my yogis grew up. She and her sister are my yogis, and they are, one of the yogis, Sharon, is friends with the author of this article, Stacy Perman. And Stacy lived 5 doors down from this family, the Salomens, that went missing in October. And it's not like, a family goes missing and they were out, on vacation. This is a really interesting family that went missing. Father, mother, their son they had together and the mother's daughter from a previous relationship. And oh, what a tangled web we weave. So we're just going to get right into it. So Stacy Perman, the writer, and this article is a wonderful, really deep dive article from Los Angeles Magazine. I believe it was the July of 2018 edition. But it took her years to amass all of her research, and it's again, it's a deep dive. So the Salomens lived in a nice middle class to upscale neighborhood in Northridge, California, in pretty much the North Valley, pretty far up in the valley, in 1982. And Saul Salomen was a naturalized citizen from Israel, and he was an Israeli commando. So that's probably number one. You should know that. I mean, everyone in Israel, I believe, has to join the army after high school for like 2 years. Like Dr. Ruth was a sniper or something in the Israeli army.
The Israeli army is, let's just call it badass on steroids.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I am not a libertarian, but I do not want the government involved in any more in our lives than it is right now. But I have often used that example of the Israeli government making you join the army after get out of high school as wishing the United States government would force everyone to take at least one restorative yoga class a week, because I feel like the world would be a better place if everyone. I feel like two things should happen. At some point during your either teenagehood or after high school, if you are a high school graduate, you should have to work in retail for 2 weeks, and you should have to take one restorative yoga class a week. Now, I'm not saying that has to be, you have to take restorative yoga for the rest of your life, but I think if you had to take restorative yoga once a week for, let's say, a year, you probably wouldn't stop, and the world would be a better place. If everyone had to work in retail for 2 weeks, the summer between you end high school and begin college, or at some point in your life, there would be no more shitty diapers left in changing rooms. There would be no more half-melted whipped cream Starbucks cups left on top of a rack of clothing. No one would do that shit anymore.
You mean there would be no, within 5 minutes of the store opening, previously neatly stacked racks of clothing, one big giant heaping mass of I can't find it?
Yes. I feel like that would stop. I worked my way through college in retail, and this is before Starbucks. But if I had to pick up one more, gross sticky cup from the Orange Julius at the food court, left on top of a rack of clothing, I was going to, kill myself and everyone else. And I just feel like everyone should work in retail for a few weeks of their life, and the world would be better. And everyone should have to take at least one restorative yoga class a week for a certain period of time. So, that's a long explanation, but that's so, everyone in Israel joins the army for a period of time after your high school education. So Saul Salomen is a former Israeli commando. He's also kind of a stereotypical dude from Israel, and that he wears a shitload of polyester and has one of the worst hair pieces I've ever seen in my life in pictures. Now, this is 1982, and they had not really, perfected the hair club for men. His hairpiece is dark brown and curly and literally lifts up from the sides of his head. So I don't know if the pictures that I've seen were all taken during a slightly windy day, but Saul needs a bobby pin or something, because the, badger that has crawled up on his head, and I feel like I've done so much recently toupee shaming, and I don't want to be that person, because I'm as vain as the next Israeli guy with a badger on his head. I highlight and color my hair. I like makeup.
Saul, his name's Saul, you said?
Yep.
Saul... I don't really think he cared. If he was a command, and this is not just the Israeli army. If he was a commando in the Israeli army, he could probably take an insult or two.
Okay, good.
And probably roll right off his
Because if you saw these pictures, you'd be like, okay. I mean, it's not. I feel like it's not even a great effort to make it look like it started on his head. It's almost as if he slapped on a hair hat, and like other guys put on a ball cap and run out the door. Like Saul slapped on his hair badger and just skedaddled out into the Northridge sun. So they're an interesting, diverse, fascinating family. Elaine is a few years older than Saul. Again, she has the daughter from the previous marriage. So let's just start at the beginning here. So in 1971, Saul meets Elaine in a bar in Hollywood, and he is an Israeli immigrant who'd come to Los Angeles just like a year earlier. He's driving taxi cabs, he's selling encyclopedias, and Elaine is this beautiful divorcee who's 28, and she has this lovely little 4-year-old daughter, Michelle, and Saul's 24. And they get together, and he sets up a business. This is going to come into play, refilling fire extinguishers. Apollo fire extinguishers. He sets up his business. And Elaine and Saul get married, and then the family of 3 becomes a family of 4. They have their son, Mitch. And they move out of their Reseda condo, and they move down the street from the author, Stacy Perman, in Northridge. And Stacy and Michelle didn't go to the same school, but had a lot in common. They were these teenage Jewish girls who lived a few doors down from each other in this, wonderful upscale, middle-class upscale neighborhood. They were, as Stacy describes them, in each other's pockets. They spent a lot of time together, a lot of sleepovers, and one of the more disturbing things, and probably the big impetus to get her to write this story, is that she was supposed to stay over at Michelle Salomen's house the night that the family disappeared. And for whatever reason, she can't remember, but she begged off for some reason. And that may be why she is still alive to write. And she is a wonderful writer. So one of the neighbors of the Salomens in October of 1982 is not really close to them, but knows Stacy's family and says, look, they've overflowed their pool or something, and my yard's getting flooded. Can you please go check on them? So Stacy and her mother knock on the door. No one answers, and they call some family members and say, look, we don't know what's going on. No one's answering the phone. No one's answering the door. The yard's flooded. Can you come and check this out? Now, the family members, Marty and Doreen Laffer, they're cousins, and Marty is immediately, his ears are perked. He's like, look, Elaine can't go to the bathroom without everyone knowing. So it's not like they went on vacation and didn't tell anyone. There's something going on. So Marty and Doreen come over to the house and show the neighbors, Stacy and her mother, how to get in the back through an unlocked bathroom window. So they get into this, back window, look around the house, and they can't really see anything unusual, but they're like, you know what, there's 2 kids involved in this, and they just wouldn't pick up and leave. That's not, everyone knows what they're doing all the time. And when they see that the beds are made, that's when they know there's a problem. Apparently, Elaine wasn't, a horrible housekeeper, but she really never made the beds. And I'm just letting the Tip-Sters know, if anything ever happens and I go missing and you show up at my house and the beds are made, call the FBI because Mark has killed me.
Well, now wait a minute. I don't make the bed either.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So if the bed's made, you have done something to me.
Or, it could be somebody else.
No, it's probably just you. You
Who
always
doesn't know that we don't make the bed?
Oh, well, no.
I would be smart enough to not make the bed.
Oh, okay. All right. You're right. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Holy mother.
I apologize for thinking that you should be the first suspect if the bed is made. You are right. You are smarter than that. So it would have to be some asshole who thinks they're covering their tracks and, makes me or you or us disappear and then makes the bed. What kind of an asshole does that?
And by the way, I just for the record, because this is going out into the stratosphere, I have no intention of killing the love of my life, who is the host of this show.
Oh, thanks. But you know what? The day is young, and I am very annoying. It could happen. That's all I'm saying. So the family, the neighbors are like, look, this is weird. The dog is here. The backyard is flooded. They are gone. There's no sign of them. Their luggage is here. Something's weird. And the beds are made. Something's strange going on here. So the doors had been locked. That's how they were able to get in the back window that Marty, the cousin, knew about. But the burglar alarm had not been activated. That was another pretty big clue. So after they call the police get a warrant to come in and look, and the police are like, we don't really see a problem here. It just doesn't look, I don't know, why it just, maybe they just disappeared. And the family and their friends are like, no, that did not happen. That did not happen at all. So much like what happened in the Will Sarazan case, it takes the police a little bit more than a cursory search to figure out there's a problem. So it's after midnight that the author, Stacy, is at home, and the police come over to the house and knock on the door and say, Michelle's bed is broken down and her pillowcases, sheets, and bedspread are all gone. And we found, Michelle's the daughter, and we found a couple of droplets on her bedroom wall and on her mattress, and there's a small patch of carpet that's been cut out.
Okay. So
yeah.
Droplets of blood?
Yeah.
Ooh.
A few droplets of blood on the bedroom wall and on the floor, on Michelle's. Just a few droplets of blood on the bedroom wall and the mattress, and her sheets, pillows, and bedspread are gone, and there's a patch of carpeting that's cut out. Don't know why it would take several hours of looking to notice that. But, maybe there's a lot going on. Maybe they have a lot of stuff in the house. They did seem to be kind of collectors. They had a lot of interesting artifacts and things. So things are starting to get a little more upsetting. The family didn't just pick up and go away and flood their yard. There's something's going on. So it's about a week later, a Caltrans worker finds a wallet that belongs to Elaine on the Antelope Valley Freeway, on the 14 freeway, right where we live. It's about 15 miles from Northridge. It's actually off the freeway in Acton. So they do a little deeper search, and they find, there's photos, documents, a couple of things, passports, a couple of things found off the 14 freeway, which they really wouldn't have a reason to be there. So it's finally turned over to the Major Crimes Division of the LAPD, and then it's reclassified from missing persons to an active homicide investigation. And that's a week later. A week later.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It takes that long to...
Yeah.
To me, just the fact that the alarm wasn't on, the doors were locked, everybody left, and the alarm hadn't been turned on. That indicates that somebody else locked up that didn't know anything about the alarm and didn't, for whatever reason, didn't have the ability to ask somebody, hey, what's the alarm code?
Exactly.
So,
Couldn't ask because maybe everyone was dead.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So a few weeks later, Stacy Perman is at home, and there's a knock on the door, and her mom's not home, and she typically wouldn't answer the door, but it was detectives who showed her their information. So she invites them into the living room, the one that's covered in plastic that no one uses. And the police pull out of a bag bloodied sheets and say, do you remember if these were on Michelle's bed? And Stacy, who's 14, is overcome with nausea, and she's like, no, I don't remember those sheets. And she bursts into tears, and she knows in her heart at that moment that the Salomens are dead. Even if those are not Michelle's sheets, she knows that the Salomens are dead. So this begins one of the longest and most complicated, and you're just going to have to believe me, complicated murder investigations in California history. Here we are 36 years later, almost 36 years later. So the investigation actively spans 10 years. It crosses, lots of parts of Southern California. It goes to London, England. There's 3 trials, family secrets. It's layered. So Stacy decides to write this article. She is not a true crime reporter. She writes for Business Week, and this is not really, what she does, but she knows some of what happened because she's a teenager, and obviously not all of the details were ever probably given to her. Her parents probably wanted to protect her from some of the more awful things. So she doesn't really know until she's a grown adult and really starts digging. And she starts digging over a decade ago. And it takes her that long to get all of this information. There's part of it is that it is so layered. Part of it is that it was so difficult for her that she had her own, emotional issues that she ended up, she kept having nightmares about the family disappearing. Her own father passes away, and she ends up going to therapy to try and, talk about the grief of losing her father. And what really comes up is the, unexpressed grief of losing her best friend in this family that no one, knows where they are. And they end up kind of becoming, the Salomen family ends up becoming kind of an LAPD statistic. And it's a really cold case, but for, the author of this article, it's a really cold case because she was her best friend.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. The disappearance happened in what year?
82, October of 1982.
And she didn't start writing about this until 10 years ago. So like
2007.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So Stacy and Michelle, were really great friends in high school and did all the teenage girl stuff, hang out in each other's bedrooms, listen to music, read magazines. Michelle had this beautiful princess canopy bed, lots of sleepovers. They hang out at the Northridge Fashion Square. They go to Knott's Berry Farm. They, go see E.T. together. And when Michelle's parents are out, because Saul and Elaine Salomen had every gadget known to man, because we'll find out later Saul's life is very complicated. But when Michelle's parents are out, Michelle and Stacy unlock the cable box and they can watch R-rated movies. All the fun stuff you do when you're a teenager and you think you're getting away with, So, Stacy's father and mother were married. Michelle's father had given up custody of her, and Saul never adopted her. But Saul, from all, accounts, was a good stepdad and a good dad to his son with Elaine, Mitch. So it's this, this family of 4, and Saul is, over 6 feet tall, crazy hairpiece, kind of a stereotypical Israeli dude, 50 pounds extra weight, goes shirtless a lot, is constantly seen with a cigarette dangling from his lip. Elaine is beautiful, very dyed blonde hair, big brown eyes, very glamorous, hosts a lot of parties. Saul has a taste for the good life, which, filling and servicing fire extinguishers probably wouldn't pay for that, but I'm sure he found other ways. He did have some side businesses, shall we say. So they had like Greek statues around their pool. They had every new gadget, in 1982, a large screen TV, which was unheard of in 1982, VCRs, all the clothes you could imagine. Stacy remembers when the Salomen family had a baby grand piano, shows up at the house, but nobody played the piano.
Okay, and he's paying for all this by filling fire extinguishers.
Yes, Apollo Fire Extinguisher Company.
Wow,
So,
I'm in the wrong business.
I think we all are. In the driveway, there's, canary yellow Continental Mark V, midnight blue Mercedes, the pride of his fleet, the burgundy Rolls Royce. And that, I guess, was just brought out for special occasions. Stacy remembers that when Elaine would take her and her daughter Michelle out to lunches, they would go to the Bonaventure Hotel downtown, and she would bust out the Rolls Royce and drive them down to, mother-daughter lunches, which sounds really sweet, unless the Rolls Royce was purchased with blood money. It's really pretty fascinating. So, yeah. So this was October 13th that they went missing. By October 20th, Daryl Gates, who was then the LA police chief, this is the part it's one of my favorite and yet turns into be one of my least favorite quotes. And I've heard it not only from him, but from many police agencies. And it's just an awful quote. And yet it gets the point across. So there's a press conference, and Daryl Gates says this investigation is difficult and perplexing. Yeah, no kidding. And he says, if there's any information that anyone has, please let us know. When asked about the droplets of blood found in Michelle's bedroom, he says, this could be very important. And one of the reporters says, well, how much blood was there? And Daryl Gates says, well, more blood than I would want to lose.
He always had a way with words.
And it's not the first time I've heard someone say that. Let's think about that for a moment. How much blood would you want to lose?
Not very much.
Right. None, I think. A month or so ago, I went through a weird series of crazy nosebleeds that were not like, oh, look, my nose is bleeding, but like, oh shit, I have to run. I've run out of paper towels and I need to run to the sink and just stand there and let it pour. And one of them went on for 20 to 30 minutes, and I had to yell to producer Mark to bring a bench from the vanity that I sit at to put my makeup on, because I had to sit down. I could no longer stand. And then this was just a nosebleed, but I broke out in a cold sweat and was going to pass out. So there's no amount of blood. I don't believe in leaching. I don't think you need to flush out your blood. There's other ways to do that where you get to keep all of it encased in your body.
Yeah, they kind of figured out that leaching, doesn't work. Maybe about 600, 700 years ago. I don't know.
Right. So when Daryl Gates says there was more blood than I would want to lose, I'm like, oh, Daryl, really? So here's the other sort of cryptic thing he says at that press conference, that they are aware of Saul Salomen.
Well.
Right. And he refuses to go any other details. But says he's not a witness for a trial and he hasn't been arrested, but they are literally, in quotes, aware of Saul Salomen. So then, of course, rumors abound. Saul is a spy. Saul is in the Israeli mafia. Where does Saul get these cars that he can't pay for on the salary of a guy who, dun, 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 dun. So it's also at a time in the early 80s when there's a lot of weird shit going on in the Los Angeles area with Israeli nationals. So there's like a insurance and credit card fraud thing going on. There's, drug trafficking, blah, blah, blah. And it's not just the Israeli mafia. It's, I don't know, the island of Togo mafia. I mean, there's lots of mafias, right?
Yeah, and the Russian mob was getting its start then, too.
I think that's probably very true. And there's, it's not just the Israeli mafia, but for some reason that was sort of honed in on by the LAPD at that time, trying to stop, I guess, one form of illegal activity coming into Southern California. But there's all these stories of dismembered bodies shoved into plastic garbage bags and scattered around the San Fernando Valley. And there's just not really a lot of proof to back that up. But so part of the rumors in the Northridge neighborhood about Saul is that he's, an Israeli intelligence officer, agent. He's a drug dealer. He's a gun runner. The family, he picked up the family and ran, and they went on the lam for, something that no one can really explain right now, some sort of unknowable offense that is in the future. But it's all crazy speculation. But Stacy Perman does remember the day her dad came home really rattled and slammed the front door. And when Stacy's mom said, "What's wrong?" He's like, Salomen just showed me a bunch of Uzis that he's selling.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah. So Stacy's dad was like, "I don't want to talk about it anymore." And she thought that maybe she had dreamed that because her father has passed away, until she talked to her father's brother recently, and her uncle said, "No, that happened. You're right. You remembered that correctly." So now, of course, Saul's family and Elaine's family is like, "That's bullshit. He was never involved in the Israeli mafia. He was a low-level grifter of some sort, and that he had some apartment buildings that he owned in Van Nuys, and he leveraged them sort of as an insurance scam."
And he dream manifested the burgundy Rolls Royce?
We'll get to how that could have happened. Oh, ye of little faith.
Okay.
Fire pants. Can you put the fire out in your pants and let me get to it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, after the family disappeared, Marty, Saul's cousin, he's a forensic accountant, by the way. He's still alive and has an office in downtown LA. He filed Saul's taxes. And when Stacy, the author, is talking to Marty about all of this, he has a storage place in North Hollywood, a storage locker, and they get to go. She goes with Marty, and they start pulling out all these old papers. And Marty finds some of Saul's income tax returns that he had filed, and he goes, "Well, this is probably the first honest one that he ever filed." But that's because Marty filed it for him after he was missing. So Stacy is still investigating. In the 2000s, she can't get over the fact that they've been missing all these years and are still missing. So in 2007, Stacy still is holding on to the fact that she was supposed to be there the night that the family went missing. And for some unknown reason, she begged off and didn't go. But they were together all the time, and it was just an odd occurrence. So she tracks down Marge, who is Elaine's mother, Michelle's grandmother. And Marge is 91 in 2007. But even though she's older and frail and lives in a lovely apartment above Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, she is, with a caretaker, she is as sharp as a tack. So Stacy calls Marge and says, "I don't want to bother you. I don't know if you remember me. I'm a friend of your missing granddaughter, Michelle." And before she can even finish the sentence, Marge says, "Oh, I know. You're the little girl that lived down the street." And she's kind of taken aback and said, yeah, but I'm wondering if you would mind talking to me. I would like to know what happened." So Marge and Doreen, who is Elaine's cousin, meet Stacy for lunch. And she's, like I said, she's 91. Stacy describes her as being sort of frozen in time. She still has the same kind of pineapple-colored dyed hair that even Elaine had. She has a floral, print blouse. And they're talking for like 3 hours at the Hamburger Hamlet on Sunset. And she says, "I'm going to tell you all of the family secrets that no one would tell you. Saul, I hated him. I blame him for, my daughter Elaine, my granddaughter Michelle, my grandson Mitch, all being gone. He was an awful man. He cheated on her constantly. He hired hookers. He went to Europe without Elaine. He stopped bathing regularly. There were stacks of cash that were hidden behind picture frames in the house. I mean, she had a lot of large stories she was, telling Stacy, not holding back that she...
It doesn't sound like she liked him very much.
Yeah, no, she didn't. But then she, I started to say something like he had a badger on his head, but I thought, just stop yourself, Melissa. But here's the part that is heartbreaking, because Marge, in hindsight, feels like she did something that got maybe her daughter into the situation she is in now. So Elaine comes to her mother and says, you know what? I think I really want to leave Saul. I'm having an affair. He's had many affairs, nameless people. And I want to be happy. I want to leave him and I want to be happy. And Marge tells her daughter, just breaks your heart, because you can see that it just killed her in hindsight. She says, look, your new boyfriend doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together. You have a beautiful home. You don't have to work. You get to go out with your friends and take your daughter and her friend to lunch at the Bonaventure Hotel. Do whatever you want on the side, but stay with Saul.
Ooh.
And it just, you can see, even at the age of 91, it just is eating her up with guilt. But her entire life has not really given up the whole quest for money. She mentions to Stacy that, there was going to be a movie made about them, and Angela Lansbury was going to play her, and that all of those movie ideas went down the drain when the case kind of ground to a halt. And it really, I know it sounds like we've been talking about it forever. There's still more. But wait, there's more. So even in this little meeting at the Hamburger Hamlet, Marge says to Stacy, look, I really want to help you, and I don't want to sound greedy, but what's in it for me? I live on a fixed income.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So I don't know that Stacy had money to toss around for, confidential informants, not so confidential anymore. But Marge ends up dying in 2011 at, the age of 95, I guess. And Stacy is still looking through news clips and interviews and police reports. And she keeps coming back to this name, Harvey Rader. So Harvey Rader grew up in London, and he's convicted of at least a dozen crimes in England, armed robbery, etc. This is probably my favorite of his of his crimes, only because it was so funny at the time. In 1980, after he has come to the United States in 1978, he's involved in this New Year's Eve arson. And Mark, you might remember this. There was this garish Saudi chic mansion on Sunset Boulevard where they had the nude statuary that...
Yes. Yes.
So when I first moved here in 1992, I took a tour. It wasn't even the Graveline tour. I don't know which one it was, but we drove past this mansion on Sunset Boulevard. Well, it was a lot. It was no longer the mansion. But the statues, and Mark, producer Mark can confirm this, this is Israeli chic, had, more money than God.
Well, he couldn't have been Israeli, right? He was
I'm sorry. Saudi chic.
Oh, he's Saudi. Right, that's what I thought. Okay.
Saudi chic, Mohammed Al-Fassi, had more money than God, and he wanted to offend, all the neighbors in Beverly Hills that he could, because his mansion was right on Sunset Boulevard, facing Sunset Boulevard, in a beautiful part of the world. And he had all these statues, and to make them more realistic, he had artists paint pubic hair and very angry, veiny penises.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, purple, red, angry, veiny penises with pubic hair, and female statues with, giant magenta areolas, and I mean, just it.
What?
Garish is one word.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
This is that's what made it so interesting.
Yeah.
I remember when when the whole story came out, they would show just the faces of the statues.
Yes, I'm sure they did.
On the news.
I'm sure because they could show nothing else below the clavicle. So this guy was, a real piece of work. So his mansion burns down and his, pubic hair statues burn down. And the fire was actually an elaborate insurance fraud scheme. And the sheik's artwork was quote unquote stolen, but Harvey Rader actually fenced it. And it was a really ugly mess, but Harvey gets immunity because he testifies against everyone else involved in this big insurance fraud scam. And one of the accused is a Hollywood plastic surgeon who was in it with the sheik to get. It's just when you have that much more money, why do you need to defraud an insurance company?
Some people just like the adventure, I think.
I guess maybe. Like you paint pubic hair on your statues and then you have your friend set them on fire.
Well, yeah, well, okay, I've got the pubic hair, I've got the orange areolas. I'm bored.
Magenta.
Oh, yeah, sorry, magenta.
I know you're colorblind.
I'm bored now. What do I do next?
I know you're colorblind, sweetheart, but if someone has an orange areola, they need to go immediately to a doctor. If it's orange, there's a problemo.
Oh, okay.
There is an orange problemo. So Harvey Rader, here is his connection to the Salomens. He is the owner of Mr. Motor, a European car repair shop. Wink, wink. So Saul Salomen was supposed to have bought used cars at auctions, give them to Harvey Rader to fix up, and then resell them. And that's how he was supposed to have had his Rolls Royce and his Mercedes and his Continental Mark V. I don't think so. But it's pretty fascinating, including the fact that Saul Salomen, the night that they disappeared, was supposed to have been at a car auction in Rosemead with Harvey Rader. Now, Harvey's story changes. That's part of the problem. He says that they were at this car auction and that Saul had wanted to... he said that they had gone to a Israeli restaurant on Ventura. Saul had said, hey, Harvey, you want to go to Hollywood with me and meet these two hookers at like 10 o'clock? And he's like, no, I'm good. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to drive to your house. I'm going to leave your van there. I'm going to put the keys in the mailbox, and then I'm going to pick up your blue Mercedes to take in to repair it. So when they look into the story a little deeper, the car auction was over at 5 p.m. So there would be no reason for them to have been eating dinner at 10 p.m. His story changes in that he said he handed the keys to the van to Elaine, and then he also said he left the keys to the van in the mailbox.
Huh.
Right. So Harvey Rader said that, I don't know what you're talking about. I just run Mr. Motor. But let me tell you, Saul has been selling Uzis, revolvers, and automatic handguns to other Israelis, and he manufactures silencers, and he transports all of those weapons in his work vans for Apollo fire extinguishers. Oh, I thought you'd say something.
Oh, no.
I was waiting for you, and I'm
now I'm listening. I'm like,
oh, sorry. I thought you were going to go.
Well, no, I'm thinking it, but
okay.
Because now the stuff is just piling up.
Right.
It's one thing after another.
Right. So they start looking a little closer into Harvey Rader when Doreen, one of Elaine's cousins, says the day they were missing, I went into the house and Saul's brother was on the house phone talking to Harvey Rader. And Saul's brother hands the phone to Doreen, Elaine's cousin, and Harvey says, did you find the guns? And Doreen's like, what guns? And Harvey says, never mind.
Okay, that's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It's funny, sad.
Funny.
Right.
Yeah.
So when Harvey's like, look, they're on vacation. They went on vacation. And Doreen says, Harvey, all their luggage is here, and Elaine's beloved hairdryer is in the house. She would never leave without her hairdryer, knowing she has that big, giant, blonde bouffant. No, they are not on vacation. So the police are looking into Harvey Rader a little closer, and they find out that a couple that was supposed to have bought and sold luxury cars with Harvey Rader, kind of, and what they said Saul Salomen had done, are missing. They are British expats, which would explain why Harvey knew them, Peter and Joan Davis. So they were, according to Harvey, Peter Davis was involved in fencing stolen jewelry and guns. And that just didn't really make sense to the police. So they show up at the Davis's home, and their dinner is still on the stove, their luggage, and a valuable painting, a Gainsborough painting, and one of their pet Akitas is gone. They find their Thunderbird abandoned at LAX in a parking lot. And this is all 2 months after, and they're just looking into Harvey and finding all roads lead to Harvey Rader. 2 months after the Davises disappear, there's a Burbank businessman named Ron Adib, and he happened to mention to relatives he's going to go see a man about some luxury cars. And he disappears too.
Well, I'm starting to see a pattern.
His car is found abandoned at LAX in a parking lot.
It's kind of a plaid pattern.
It's a very British looking pattern.
Yeah, maybe it's tweed, but
right.
Yes.
Herringbone tweed. So they don't really have a clear motive. Is it just business dealings? Is Harvey, insane? They don't have any witnesses. And the biggest problem, they don't have any bodies. No bodies. Everyone that Harvey becomes involved in disappears.
Geez, you'd think they'd find something or somebody or some bones or something.
Something. Wouldn't you love to know that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, the Salomens families, mostly Elaine's family, hires a revolving door of private eyes. One private eye is Joe Sampson. He's from London, and he thinks, I think I can get a line on Harvey Rader and his world. I can do things from London that perhaps the police in the States can't do. So he really digs deep and is trying to find everything he can, and he comes across a taxi driver in England named Ashley Paul. And he is Harvey Rader's cousin. He offhandedly calls himself Harvey Rader's right-hand man. And with a little questioning, the PI Sampson finds out he lived right next door to the Davies in Granada Hills when they went missing.
Well, isn't that something?
Isn't that something? When the police question Ashley Paul, he says that he had driven Peter Davies home after a car auction. And they considered Ashley Paul, he's just like a non-starter. He's like nothing. And they let him go back to England and drive cabs.
Well, wait, they had him in the United States and they let him go back?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes never mind.
I know. So the PI flies back several times to London, and he's like, look, please just talk about your cousin Harvey Rader. Just tell us anything about if he's involved at all with the Salomens' disappearance. You don't even have to say anything about the Davis people or Ron Adib. So finally, one day, Ashley Paul caves. So a woman who identifies herself as a relative of Elaine's, and I don't know if she really was or if the PI just got a woman, kind of broke down Ashley Paul. And the first words out of Paul's mouth are, "Oh God, help me. The PI was right. Harvey's a psycho."
Wow. I'm being fascinated to know how this woman got him to do that.
I think she just played on his guilt for saying her family has been missing for so long. Can he please help? And I think he just, now he's not dumb. He's dumb, but he's not dumb. And he goes to Scotland Yard and says, okay, I'll give you a formal statement, but I won't say anything else until I'm granted immunity from prosecution of all of these murders.
Wow.
So there's a telephone negotiation between the LAPD and Scotland Yard. And they get Ashley Paul to agree to come to LA under Scotland Yard escort and provide statements to the LAPD. He said he would help them locate the bodies. He would tell them exactly where everyone was buried. He knew all the dirt. So he gets into town on 1983, November of 1983, a little over a year after the Salomens have been missing. And he says that he's really scared of what Harvey Rader can do to him. And it's like, really? He's your cousin. You helped him murder all of these people, and you're afraid of what he'll do to you. Okay. So Ashley Paul puts himself at the scene of every murder. He's present at all of the murders. And he said that Harvey Rader admitted to killing Ron Adib by himself. So I shouldn't say he's at all the murders. He's at the Davis murders and he's at the Salomen murders. He's calling them the murders. But all he would admit is that he had knowledge of it. He's
not saying he participated in actually killing people.
No. And he leads them astray in kind of a crappy way. He says that the Salomens were killed by Harvey Rader, his cousin, a car dealer named Jerry Baxter, and two men he calls the Italians, but he can't remember their names. He says that Harvey Rader owed Saul Salomen $20,000. Saul wanted his money back. Harvey Rader shot him in the head and stuffed him in the trunk of his Rolls Royce. Ashley Paul says the Italians drove to the Salomens' home where Harvey Rader jumped Elaine, slammed her head into a marble bar, crushed her skull. He said they beat little Mitch to death with a baseball bat, and they strangled the teenager Michelle. And that, Ashley Paul just stands in the driveway, and Harvey Rader and the other two men, or three men, the Italians and Jerry Baxter, come out of the house carrying three bodies wrapped in sheets and place them in the trunk of the family's Mercedes. He then changes his mind and says that none of this happened. But in the meantime, he, says that because he's Harvey's cousin and his right-hand man, he's just used to being dispatched to do things. So he says that Harvey had planned on stealing the artwork from the Davis house, which, as you know, the Gainsborough painting is missing. He said that, and he lived, Ashley Paul lived right next door to the Davises in Granada Hills. He said that Harvey Rader showed up. He was going to talk to him about, buying some luxury cars, and he shoots Peter Davis in the head and takes his painting and his dog, and that he takes his wife, Joan Davis and Peter Davis, and drives them up the 5 freeway and drops them off on the side of the road in Bakersfield.
But doesn't kill him.
No, he killed them.
Oh.
He'd killed them. He shot Peter Davis in the head. He doesn't explain what happened to Joan Davis, but he drops their bodies off.
Oh, the body. I got it.
Yeah, both bodies off the 5 freeway. So he then, drives them to all these sites, and no one's ever found. None of that ever pans out. He said that they had wrapped up the Salomens, in sheets and put them in the trunk of the car and taken them up to Acton off of the 14 freeway. He takes them to these areas. He's like, I'm going to show you where all these bodies are found. And when they go to some of the areas where he said the bodies should be, they do find a tattered green quilt, but they can never tie it to the Salomens house. They looked through all these desert areas and there's nothing there. And the police think that he's just showing them places that bodies would be easy to dump, but that is never going to pan out. So the following day after they do the search in Acton where no members of the Salomen family are found, they drive up to Bakersfield to the area that he said off of the freeway, and there's nothing there either. In the meantime, they're giving Ashley Paul polygraph tests, 4 of them to be exact, and he fails all of them.
Okay.
So offhandedly, Ashley Paul says, Harvey told me about mine shafts would be a great place to bury bodies, but he never took me to them, so I don't know where they are. And there are apparently a lot of mine shafts off of the 14 freeway.
That makes sense. There were a lot of mining up there for borax and other stuff.
Yep. So with Ashley Paul's statements, at least the LAPD thinks, all right, we can bring this case to trial, even though it's extremely circumstantial. So they arrest Harvey Rader for the murder of the Salomens, even though there are no bodies, and he's held without bail. And, Daryl Gates is like, when we arrested him, I could just tell he held himself like a con man. What does that even...
Yeah. Daryl Gates was...
He was chatty, but didn't really say a lot.
We could do 15 episodes on Daryl Gates.
So...
Let's not.
Yeah. Daryl Gates says, look, this is admittedly very, very slim evidence corroborating these statements by Ashley Paul, but we're going to try. So Ashley Paul ends up admitting that he had made up the 2 Italian guys with no name and Jerry Baxter, the art dealer. And actually, Jerry Baxter is a real person, but he says he's not involved. He is an auto dealer, not involved. So not long after Harvey Rader's arrested, he is released because there's insufficient admissible evidence. So the next day after Harvey Rader is released, Ashley Paul's immunity is revoked. And he's placed under arrest for the murders of Joan and Peter Davis and the Salomen family. So this is to sweat him out because they think he's more involved in the murders than he ever admitted, and they want to get more information against Harvey Rader. So they thought if they, put pressure on Ashley Paul as the weak link, that he would, if they violate his immunity agreement because he lied to them about everything, they can sweat him out and he'll finger his cousin Harvey Rader. Well, that apparently a miscalculation by the LAPD and the prosecutor's office, because not long after Ashley Paul's arrested, an LA municipal court judge holds a closed hearing, and she says Ashley Paul's statements are thrown out. She concludes that the immunity deal was poorly worded. Ashley Paul had been coerced into compromising himself, and the DA lost his appeal on the decision. And in the meantime, Ashley Paul gets on a plane and heads back to England and starts driving cabs again.
Unbelievable.
Yep. And every time that the PI, Joe Sampson, would fly back to England to try and convince him, plead with him to come back and testify, he would refuse and said that he is afraid of his cousin. So, this is pretty interesting. To find out how Ashley Paul goes from being a non-starter witness to a star witness to a liar whose immunity is revoked to then being a murder suspect, Stacy Perman finds out that Paul's court-appointed attorney at the time, Leslie Abramson, Leslie Abramson of the Eric and Lyle Menendez fame. Yeah. So Stacy Perman calls Leslie Abramson, and she's like, I don't gossip about my previous cases. Click. So she refers Stacy to San Diego attorney Charles Sevilla, who was her co-counsel. And he declines to talk and says that I haven't spoken to that client in many years. And by the way, I want to remind you that case is still open. Thanks, attorney Sevilla. So the deputy district attorney who had tried to prosecute Ashley Paul and drafted his immunity agreement, Ronald Cohen, he wouldn't talk either. He's now a Superior Court judge. And his answer is sitting judges can't discuss open cases.
Wow. So
yeah,
that's just dead end.
Right.
Dead end after dead end.
That's right. Everyone has to cover their own ass, and it's just going to be ugly. So after Ashley Paul is, back in England, the case just sort of sits on the shelf. And then in December of 1986, Harvey Rader is deported back to England for failing to disclose on his immigration application that he had been convicted of 17 criminal offenses. But he re-enters the U.S. 3 months later with a false passport. So
what a guy.
He's a charmer, and he really wants to be in the United States. I guess there's, bigger paintings and more people to kill. And then a little, 6 months later, in May of 1987, detectives rip apart the parking lot that Harvey Rader had owned Mr. Motor, and they were looking for the bodies under the parking lot of Harvey Rader's old business, Mr. Motor. They found nothing, but they arrest Harvey Rader, and he is once again convicted of passport fraud, and he's sentenced to 3 years in a federal prison.
Okay, so they got him on ice now.
Yes, if you want to call it that. So the family at least thinks that, okay, he's in a federal prison in the United States right now, so we have some time to try and figure this out. So there's an article in the LA Times in January of 1988, and they seem to have the Salomen family has an ally in a deputy district attorney named Lonnie Felker, who says, we know who did it, we're never going to quit, and everything points to Harvey Rader. But the DA at the time, Gil Garcetti, says, we just don't have enough to go on. It's just, there's not enough evidence that will permit a jury or a court to even find him guilty. He says in another LA Times article, what we really need is new evidence or his cousin Ashley Paul to come back to the States and testify against Rader. But that's not going to happen. So just about the time that Harvey Rader's sentence for his passport fraud is going to be up in August, the LAPD makes an unexpected move. And they ask the state attorney general's office to prosecute him for murder. And they say, we found additional evidence, but they don't say what it is. So Harvey Rader goes to trial on May 6th of 1989. And it's a death penalty case. And Mark Lessam, who's a deputy public defender, represented him. Now, Lessam is retired, and he kind of messed up, and he kind of realizes it. But he's semi-retired, and he has a Studio City office with his son, who's also a public defender. And at first he was, reluctant to talk about the case, and I don't blame him. But he said, I want you to know Harvey Rader wasn't the only suspect in this case. He's saying Saul Salomen had a huge circle of associates, and the evidence against him, against Harvey Rader wouldn't have sat for 6 years unless it was a really weak case. Well, thank you, Attorney Lessam. We understand that. he said that even his own investigators sprayed luminol in Harvey Rader's office at Mr. Motor and didn't find one trace of blood. Well, he's not dumb enough to kill people in his own office, for God's sake. He kills them in their car. He, said that there was a woman that saw Harvey Rader's car in Acton off the 14 freeway right about the time that the Salomens disappear. And I'm sure that Harvey Rader had a fancy car because that was his, business. Attorney Lessem is like, that is just ridiculous. She, was blind. I mean, he's poking holes in everything and saying, there was $2,500 in the Salomen house, and the jewelry was untouched. Robbery's not a motive. And then he also said he found a prostitute that was with Saul that night, confirming Harvey Rader's story that he wasn't the last person that saw Saul Salomen, that the prostitute in Hollywood was, and that, he was just doing this car business with him and, put the keys in the mailbox. But he also says that Harvey Rader wasn't in business with Saul Salomen.
What?
I know. That's what I'm saying. He's, I think Attorney Lessem realizes that he had a client that's dirty as the day is long. And okay. So he says, I think Saul Salomen was a drug dealer. I think that's just it. I don't think there's any question about that. So after 3 weeks of deliberations, the jury foreman sends a note to the judge on August 28th of 1989, and he says, "We cannot come to a total agreement." 3 more days of deliberations pass, and the jury of 6 men and 6 women are deadlocked 11-1 for conviction.
Ooh.
11-1. The judge has to declare a mistrial. Marge and the other Salomen family members burst into tears and, outside the courtroom say, "Obviously, I don't think justice was done. We're never going to stop. We're going to see that justice is done." So poor Stacy is, apprised of some of this as she's growing up, and this case is going on. And it's just heartbreaking, all of the labyrinth that this has to work its way through. So there's a second trial. It opens on January 4th of 1990, and it ends 1 day later in a mistrial because the judge says there's a conflict of interest. It turns out that Harvey Rader's court-appointed attorney, Mark Lessem, is representing a key witness, an auto detailer who was supposed to testify that he saw bloodstains in a car that Rader was driving after the Salomens' disappearance.
Oh, and they went through all that and they couldn't find that out before the second day of trial.
Mm-hmm.
Good grief.
They were representing the detailer in a drunk driving case, and so Mark Lessem is then barred from representing Rader. So the third trial, Joel Isaacson and Carl Jones take over as the defense for Harvey Rader for the third trial. They go at it from a different way. So every bit of circumstantial evidence against Harvey Rader, they had to explain away as an innocent happening. It seems like both Isaacson and Jones think that Harvey was guilty, but I guess, anyway. So they say, look, everybody knows that Harvey and Saul Salomen were in business together. And it wasn't like he was just picked at random, to be a suspect. But they introduce a bigger question during the 2-month trial. These investigators for the defense attorneys tracked down the juror who was the holdout during the trial. And she told them that she didn't even think the Salomens were dead. So that becomes their plan of attack.
Aha.
The one holdout.
In the first trial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's their plan of attack. They have to convince the jurors that the Salomens were alive, are alive, and poor Harvey Rader is being accused of something that he couldn't have done because these people are alive. So they track down a pharmacist, a gas station attendant, and a Carpinteria Police Department dispatcher who said that they had seen the family members after they were reported missing.
Okay, then.
And during the closing argument, which stretched into 3 hours, Joel Isaacson gets a map from his daughter's encyclopedia and puts flags all over it and says, "Where are the Salomens?" So one of the things I read that made the most sense to me, would a DA's office try to prosecute a man 3 times if perhaps the Salomen family had been put in witness protection, which is one of the theories, that they, were on the lam, being, hidden because of potentially Saul Salomon's, business dealings, that, they were under witness protection. They lived a, compromised lifestyle. Would the DA not be notified and continue to prosecute a man for a murder of 3 or 4 people that had not been murdered?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think that's a very good question to put out there. So the jury deliberates for 2 days. Rader is so nervous that he has to have Joel Isaacson hold him up. When the judge gives the verdict of not guilty, Rader collapses and hits his head on the table. Joel Isaacson says, "The reality is everybody was shocked, most of all Mr. Rader, who fainted when they said, not guilty. That's how much of a chance he thought he had." Now, as they leave the courtroom, Marge is screaming, "He's a killer." Marty, the Salomen cousin, who's the forensic accountant, was uncomfortably in the courthouse elevator with some of the jury, and they can't even look him in the eye.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So when Marge passes away in 2011, she is haunted by the fact that there were no bodies, so she can't hold a proper funeral, which is according to the Jewish tradition. So DA Lonnie Felker, who ended up retiring in 2008, was still beset with guilt and says, a lot of things could have happened, but they just didn't. I can't comment on how we could have done this better, but without Ashley Paul's testimony, everything we had just stood or fell on what we had, and apparently it wasn't enough according to the jury. So everyone keeps saying everything points back to Harvey Rader. Everything points back to Harvey Rader. So trying to find Harvey Rader at this point, Stacy Perman gets a hold of Joel Isaacson, his last defense attorney, and says, "Can you get a hold of Harvey Rader or even Ashley Paul?" And Joel Isaacson tries, and he says, "Look, I've tried really hard, but all the numbers I have for them are out of service, and every other avenue I've looked, I can't reach them. It looks like they've just vanished." Sort of like the people that he's accused of murdering. The end of the Los Angeles Magazine article by Stacy Perman ends with something really haunting, which is that every few years, the sheriff's search and rescue teams, spread out across Acton, looking in mines, practicing mine rescues. They go down 100 feet, sometimes even 1,000 feet. Old mine shafts that produced copper and gold in the late 1800s until they, dried up and were sealed off. And every once in a while, they focus their search on trying to find the remains of Saul, Elaine, Michelle, and Mitch Salomen. So if you know anything about the Salomens, if you know where Harvey Rader and Ashley Paul are, call someone, call anyone, call us. and more cowbell.
And remember, if you've got a tip on this case or any other, our telephone number is 832-TIPSTER. That's 1-832-847-7837. And our email address is jttipsters@gmail.com.